Chapter 1: The Hollow Giant. Welcome to Synapse Daily. Tokyo, 1978. A city of neon and steel. A city of endless noise. But the surface was failing. The economic miracle had a dark side. Space was no longer a luxury. It was a ghost. People lived in matchbox apartments. The air smelled of lead and exhaust. Every square inch of Ginza cost a fortune. The sky was blocked by gray concrete. Tokyo was suffocating under its own weight. Then, the visionaries looked down. They didn't see dirt. They didn't see darkness. They saw a second chance. They called it the Hollow Giant. A twin city beneath the feet of millions. This wasn't just a basement project. It was a Geotropolis. A massive, breathing organism carved into the crust. Engineers from Taisei and Shimizu met in smoke-filled rooms. They didn't just draw buildings. They drew the future of human survival. Can you feel the weight of the city above you? Imagine 10 million people walking over your head. You are 100 feet down. Yet, you breathe fresh air. You see light. The designers wanted to solve the urban crush. They wanted to move the chaos underground. The surface would be for trees. The depths would be for life. This was the birth of the underground dream. A dream built on desperation and heavy machinery. The giant was waking up. Chapter 2: The Alice City Blueprint. The Taisei Corporation had a name for it. They called it Alice City. It was a nod to the rabbit hole. But there was no magic here. Only cold, hard engineering. The blueprint was terrifyingly ambitious. They planned 2 massive concrete cylinders. Each was 262 feet wide. They reached 500 feet into the bedrock. Think about that depth. That is deeper than the tallest towers. One cylinder was for power and water. The other was for waste and air. They were the lungs and heart. Between them, a web of glass spheres. These spheres held the Alice world. Offices for the salarymen. Hotels for the tourists. Theaters for the lonely. It was a self-sustaining ecosystem. You could live for years without seeing the sky. The cost was a staggering $4 billion. In 1978, that was an impossible sum. But Japan was rich. Japan was bold. The engineers argued over the pressure. How much weight can the earth hold? They studied the granite. They tested the water tables. They weren't just building rooms. They were building a fortress against the surface. It was a masterpiece of physics. But for some, it felt like a cage. A high-tech tomb for the living. Chapter 3: The Urban Geo-Grid. While Taisei built cylinders, Shimizu thought bigger. They proposed the urban Geo-Grid. It wasn't just one site. It was a massive network. A 485 square mile grid beneath the entire city. Imagine a subterranean spider web. It connected stations every few kilometers. Each station was a massive atrium. They were designed to house 500,000 people. The grid managed everything. Utilities moved through silent tunnels. Automated trains carried people in seconds. But the main selling point was safety. Japan lives in fear of the big one. Earthquakes are the national nightmare. But physics works differently in the deep. On the surface, buildings whip like trees. Underground, the movement is a dull thud. At 30 meters deep, the soil absorbs energy. It acts like a giant shock absorber. The Geo-Grid was the ultimate bunker. A city that couldn't fall down. Why? Because it was already at the bottom. It was the most stable place on Earth. Engineers called it the Seismic Shield. People started to wonder. Is the safest place actually the darkest? The grid promised life without fear. But it required total trust in the machine. Chapter 4: The Battle for Sunlight. The biggest enemy wasn't the cost. It wasn't the rock. It was the human brain. Humans are biological machines. We need the sun. Without it, the mind breaks. We lose our sense of time. We sink into deep depression. The 1978 architects knew this. They launched the battle for sunlight. Their solution was pure science fiction. Solar domes. They placed massive, computer-controlled mirrors on the surface. These mirrors tracked the sun all day. They caught the light. They beamed it down giant shafts. Prisms at the bottom scattered the rays. You could sit in a plaza 200 feet down. You would see real sunlight on the floor. They even designed artificial horizons. Large screens that mimicked the blue sky. They used circadian lighting systems. The walls changed from orange to blue. It followed the rhythm of the day. But could a mirror replace the sun's soul? Could a screen replace the clouds? Engineers studied the mole human psychology. They found that people needed a visual exit. They needed to see a way out. Even if it was just a reflection. Chapter 5: The Vertical Commute. In this world, the car was a relic. The commute was no longer horizontal. It was vertical. Forget the 40-minute drive in traffic. Forget the crowded subway cars. In the underground city, you used the express drop. You stepped into a high-speed elevator. It didn't go to the 50th floor. It went to the -50th. The elevators were like space capsules. They moved silently through the concrete layers. Between the main hubs, automated pods zipped along. No traffic jams. No noise. No pollution. The surface of Tokyo would change forever. Imagine the Shinjuku district. But instead of cars, there are gardens. Instead of asphalt, there are forests. The industry was buried. The commerce was hidden. The surface was returned to nature. It was a radical trade. You give up your view of the sky. In return, you get a quiet city. You get a forest at your doorstep. It was a vision of a green utopia. But it was built on a gray foundation. To save the environment, we had to leave it. We had to become dwellers of the deep. Was this the evolution of man? Or a retreat into the caves? Chapter 6: The Temperature of Silence. The surface of Tokyo is a chaotic furnace. In summer, the humidity is a physical weight. In winter, the winds from the north cut like glass. But move 60 feet down. Everything changes. The Earth has a secret. It is a thermal battery. It holds a constant temperature. Exactly 15 degrees Celsius. All year round. No matter the season above. The 1978 engineers realized this was a gold mine. They called it thermal equilibrium. Underground buildings didn't need massive heaters. They didn't need power-hungry air conditioners. The rock itself acted as insulation. It was the ultimate energy saver. Imagine a city that never gets cold. A city that never sweats. The silence was also different here. On the surface, Tokyo is a wall of sound. Horns, sirens, and millions of footsteps. Below, the earth swallows noise. The silence was thick. It was heavy. Architects had to design audio ambience. They pumped in the sound of wind. They played the faint chirping of birds. Without it, the silence was too perfect. It was unnatural. It made people hear their own heartbeats. It was a world of engineered peace. But for some, that peace felt like a vacuum. It was the temperature of the grave, wrapped in luxury. Chapter 7: The Seismic Shield. Japan is a land born of fire and shaking. Earthquakes are not a possibility, they are a certainty. The 1978 visionaries had to answer one question. Is it safe to be in a hole when the world shakes? The answer was a scientific paradox. Yes. It is safer than the sky. They called this the seismic shield effect. Think of a boat on the ocean. On the surface, the waves toss it around. But deep underwater? A submarine feels nothing. The Earth works the same way. Seismic waves gain power as they reach the surface. They whip the tall towers of Shinjuku back and forth. But deep in the bedrock, the movement is a dull vibration. The soil acts as a massive dampener. The underground city was built with flexible concrete. The tunnels were designed to breathe with the earth. If a 7.0 magnitude quake hit, the people below would only feel a tremor. No falling glass. No collapsing roofs. It was the ultimate bunker for a nation in danger. They designed massive expansion joints that could slide 3 feet without breaking. While the surface world crumbled, the underground would stay still. It was the safest place in the Pacific Ring of Fire. But could you trust the ceiling not to blink? Chapter 8, The Psychological Toll. But man is not a mole. Evolution did not prepare us for the deep. The designers of 1978 hit a wall. Not a wall of stone, but a wall of the mind. They called it subterranean claustrophobia. In early tests, people felt a strange pressure. It wasn't physical. It was the weight of the sky they couldn't see. To fight this, they hired space psychologists. They found that humans need a visual escape. If you can see 50 feet, you feel trapped. If you can see 500 feet, you feel free. So, they built massive atriums. They made the ceilings 100 feet high. They used perspective painting to make walls look like distant mountains. They added waterfalls. Real water, falling hundreds of feet. The sound of the water masked the hum of the machines. It reminded the brain of the surface. But the most important trick was the fake horizon. They used blue LEDs to create a line where the wall met the ceiling. This tricked the inner ear. It prevented dizziness. Still, some testers reported time dilation. Without the sun moving, an hour felt like a day. Or a day felt like an hour. The engineers could build the city. But could they rebuild the human spirit to love the dark? Chapter 9, The Infrastructure Goliaths. Behind the neon lights and waterfalls lay the Goliaths. The mechanical systems that kept the city alive. To house 500,000 people underground, the logistics were a nightmare. Think about the air. It wasn't just about oxygen. It was about pressure and heat. Every human body is a 100-watt heater. 500,000 people create a furnace. The 1978 plans included heat siphons. Massive pipes that carried excess heat to the surface to melt snow. Then there was the waste. You can't just flush a toilet 500 feet down. You have to fight gravity. They designed vacuum sewage systems. High-pressure tubes that sucked waste upward at 60 miles per hour. And the air filtration? It was military grade. They had to scrub the carbon dioxide. They had to remove the fine dust of the concrete. The main artery was a shaft 100 feet wide. It pumped millions of cubic feet of air every minute. If the power failed, the city had 3 hours of oxygen. They built backup hearts, massive diesel generators in lead-line rooms. It was a masterpiece of 1970s analog tech. It was a city on life support. Every breath you took was calculated. Every drop of water was recycled 7 times. It was the most efficient city ever designed. And the most fragile. Chapter 10, The Economic Collapse. Then came the 1980s. The era of the bubble economy. Japan felt invincible. Real estate prices in Tokyo were insane. Theoretically, the land under the Imperial Palace was worth more than all of California. On paper, Alice City made sense. But in reality, the math began to bleed red. The price of digging had tripled. The technology required was moving faster than the construction. Investors began to blink. They looked at the $4 billion price tag and saw a black hole. It wasn't just about the concrete. It was about the insurance. How do you insure a city that exists in a place where no one has lived before? The economic bubble was a dream built on air. And the underground city was a dream built on stone. When the bubble popped in the early 90s, the shovels stopped moving. The blueprints were rolled up. The massive Goliath machines were sold for scrap. The hollow giant remained just that, hollow. It was a victim of its own ambition. The visionaries realized that while they could conquer the rock, they couldn't conquer the market. The city below was abandoned before the first resident could move in. The neon lights were never switched on. The waterfalls remained dry. Tokyo stayed on the surface, crowded and loud, while its twin slept in the dirt. Chapter 11: The Legacy of 1978. Did the dream die? Not entirely. You cannot kill an idea that bold. The 1978 concepts didn't disappear, they mutated. If you walk through Tokyo today, you are walking through the ghost of Alice City. Look at the underground malls of Shinjuku. Look at the vast labyrinths of Tokyo Station. These are the fragments of the Geo-Grid. The engineers took the lessons of the Seismic Shield and applied them to the subway system. They took the solar dome technology and used it in luxury skyscrapers. The blueprints from 1978 became the textbook for modern urban survival. Japan didn't build a second city, but they hollowed out the one they had. Today, millions of Japanese people spend hours underground every day. They shop, eat, and commute in climate-controlled tunnels. They don't call it a Geotropolis anymore. They just call it the basement. But the scale is different. The 1978 vision was about living. Today is about moving. We took the convenience of the underground, but we kept our bedrooms under the sun. The hollow giant was carved into pieces and scattered across the city. Chapter 12: Modern Echoes. If you want to see the true successor of the 1978 dream, go to Kasakabe. Deep beneath the outskirts of Tokyo lies the Gikans project. It is the metropolitan area outer underground discharge channel. It looks like a cathedral built for gods. Massive pillars, 60 feet high. Silent, cold, and vast. It is an underground temple designed to hold floodwaters. It is the direct descendant of the Alice City infrastructure. It proves that we can build massive, stable environments in the deep. It uses the same Goliath pumps envisioned in 1978. When the typhoons hit, this hidden world saves the surface. It is the silent guardian of Tokyo. Researchers are now revisiting the 1978 files. Why? Because the surface is changing. Global warming is making cities heat up. Space is still a ghost. The arguments for Alice City are coming back to life. Architects are looking at the thermal equilibrium again. They are looking at the seismic shield again. The 1978 dream wasn't a failure. It was a prototype. It was a message sent from the past to a future that is running out of room. Chapter 13: The Future Below. So, where do we go from here? The sky is crowded. The satellites are watching. The surface is hot and expensive. The only frontier left in our cities is the one beneath our boots. The 1978 concepts were a warning and a promise. They warned us that the surface has limits. They promised us that the Earth is a refuge. Imagine a future Tokyo where the urban Geo-Grid is finally complete. A city where the smog is gone because the industry is buried. A city where the noise is replaced by the sound of artificial waterfalls. We might not become moles by choice, but by necessity. We may trade the blue sky for a perfect, digital one. As we close this chapter of Synapse Daily, ask yourself, would you take the trade? Would you live 500 feet down if it meant safety and silence? The blueprints are still there. The granite is still waiting. The hollow giant is not dead, it is just waiting for the next generation to pick up the shovel. The future is not up. It is down. Thank you for listening to Synapse Daily.